Welcome to 60 Minutes with a Woman, the podcast where we sit down with remarkable women. In each episode, we dive into their journey, the challenges, the triumph, and the lessons that shape them. Get ready for raw conversations, inspiring stories, and actionable insights to fuel your own success. Tune in because every woman's story deserves to be heard.
Victoria, it's an honor having you here, honestly.
Thank you.
We spent some time one-on-one last week, and it was a truly transformative time for me. Reason being, our conversation was nothing like I have ever had with anybody before. There was a sense of mission in our conversation. You brought many points that were part of my life that I wasn't even aware about. And I was just in awe after our conversation. And I really wanted you to be here and share that with the audience today.
Well, thank you. It's such a great gift to spend more time with you. I enjoyed talking to you between different cultures, different languages, and just connecting heart to heart. You are such a stand for sisterhood, and I feel that we need more of those deep conversations.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much. I am going to give a little background, a little bit of your background to the audience. You were born and raised in Russia. Your journey was shaped by a lifelong research of healing science. You are an award-winning Ivy League psychologist. You work with celebrities as well.
I look at every person as a celebrity, and I look at it as a mission and opportunity to celebrate life, because we're all made out of stars. So I feel like there is a star in every person.
That's beautiful. You are also a mother, a wife, and a mother of 4. You started in banking, right? You started in finance, and then you shifted toward psychology midway, during your life, which is amazing because it's a step that a lot of us don't dare to take. So that is very courageous already. But you didn't only do the academic side of psychology. You also research enormously about the contradiction between modern medicine in today's world. Yes. And you wanted to have a more holistic approach to true healing. So I have questions for you.
I hope I have answers.
So my first question would be, how did your life growing up in Russia shape who you are today?
Well, it's such a complex question because the country I was born in no longer exists. And that's the country where Ukrainian people and Russian people were considered the same people. So obviously, it's not the reality we live in today. And the Soviet Union and Russia, this is the land of contrasts. So there is deep cultural backbone, but there is also tremendous amount of trauma, 2 world wars, a lot of turbulence, socioeconomic, political. So when you're born in such complex environment, you absolutely carry a certain badge of honor to transform that identity and figure out what it means to you to be Russian, to be Soviet first, to be Russian. And now for me, America is my home. I haven't lived in Russia for a long time, but my formative years did start there, and I was a highly sensitive child. Mm-hmm. So it was actually very challenging energetically for many reasons. First of all, I was born in a military family. My father is a military psychologist, or maybe...
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, maybe I took on his trade in some shape or form as well. Mm-hmm. But also the heaviness of the post-war reality really affected me as a child, and I only made the connections later in life. But I had scoliosis, and I had a very severe stage of scoliosis where I was told that probably won't be able to bear children. I proved them wrong, obviously.
Yes, in the best possible way.
But I was in physical therapy with the children that were severely deformed. Like we were talking hatchback situations. So I think that for me personally, the density and the trauma of the war that was still part of the collective narrative was very difficult. And I spent many, many years being at war with God because I couldn't rectify how you can actually be happy in a society where there is so much unfortunate, so much trials and tribulations. So to answer the question, I think it put me on the spiritual path of trying to understand what it is to be a human being in a very dense environment where life is not always perceived as valuable and there is bigger mission attached to it.
Did you always know that you were going to travel abroad?
No. Actually, United States was a bit of a surprise for me, and I didn't really speak English very well when I came to United States. My first language was French. So Europe is a much more logical choice for people from Russia sometimes. Mm-hmm. So United States was that interesting land, the land of Native Americans that I thought about but never really considered. And I came to United States because my mom got married. So my stepfather was American.
Ah, I see. So this is where you got a little bit of the hint of wanting maybe to come over here?
Well, I was very young. So I came to United States when I was 17.
You came with your mother.
Yeah.
I see.
So it kind of like was decided on my behalf in a way. But I think overall it was a right decision, and I'm truly grateful for American society and just the journey I've been on.
So when you came here, did you feel that it was easy to adjust?
I don't think it was an easy adjustment for me personally because of the level of experience I had as a Russian person.
It's a little bit of a cultural shock.
For sure, and I couldn't really connect to peers of my age, and I also had very unusual path. Even for someone from Russia, I was a witness of the political assassination. I was a key witness right before I came to United States, so it was a very complex matter, obviously very violent matter. So I kind of lost my innocence at a very young age. So when I came to United States, I couldn't fit in very well in the typical 16, 17, 18, 19-year-old reality. So you would consider me or call me an old soul probably.
Yes.
But it was like...
You had to mature faster.
Yes,
for your
and
age. Absolutely.
Just, anyone who touches that level of violence, it impacts you. It makes you question the meaning of life at a very shocking realization. And overall, Russia went through a lot of instability. We stood in lines for food. That was part of my reality of being born.
I can't even imagine what it must have felt like.
It's hard to imagine because we have such abundance of consumer products that we take it for granted. And that wasn't always the case. And it's not always the case across the globe. So as a young person that came from the world where things are not always available, I was so impressed with the level of abundance, but I also had a different perspective on what matters.
Your values were impacted by just a different lifestyle, different experiences. If I feel a little the same way about Belgium. When I came here for the first time, the abundance, what you mentioned, certain people will call that over-consumerism. I don't want to condemn it because it's available. So it's different when you don't have it and you arrive here, it's abundance.
I'm a mother that is raising her children in a consumerist society. And unfortunately, your value in the social circle is deeply affected by the shoes you wear or the phone you have. And it's a very interesting conversation to go deeper with the children that you're raising and ask them what matters to them. And I'm very proud of my oldest son because when I started my philanthropic journey, we had an incredible opportunity to contribute to Native American tribes
that's wonderful.
in South Dakota. And my son was there with me throughout my own journey and discovery.
How old was he?
So it was 3 years ago, so he was between 9 and 10. And he actually told me, Mom, take my Christmas money because I will use it for the video games and those people have nothing.
Wow.
And I was really proud because I
Of
felt
course.
like this human being understands the importance of beings versus things. And I'm still very proud of him, and he's been a real contribution in my endeavors in Native American communities. And I kind of do it for him and with him, and it's fun.
It's amazing that he also had the consciousness of wanting to be part of it. You must have a very special bond with him. You can already know that he has a beautiful, open, big heart. And that's very nice.
Yes, and he also struggles like any other middle schooler with social media and just finding himself. I find that it's actually very tricky to be a young person in a current reality because we didn't have so much external pressure
Yes.
to fit in. We didn't have that level of attention that they have, and it really affects their psyche.
I'm just happy you brought that up. We didn't have the time to talk about that last time. So do you mind if I dig just a little deeper in this?
Absolutely.
Do you feel that nowadays children have an issue connecting with their true self or the true value of life because of what's available to them?
So you see, this is a very deep question. Is it the nature or is it the nurture? And because I have several children, and my middle son and my oldest son, even though they come from the same environment, they have very different personalities. I get to watch a very different journey for the soul, how you can actually individuate in the current realm without being affected or being affected. And what I will say is that there are obvious addiction patterns that every child gets inflicted with when technology is introduced. And there is absolutely the reason why most of the Silicon Valley executives do not allow their children on the phones or any kind of devices. It's a dopamine stimulation that is very dangerous and very addicting. And
Especially for a young brain.
right. And I had to reconcile it with myself as a mother. Like, okay, this is the reality they live in. Are they going to be safe? And I want to trust that their human experience was designed in such a way that they have to overcome that specific, let's call it trauma, that specific seduction. So I had to overcome my trauma as someone who comes from a post-war society. They have to overcome the trauma of consumerism, the trauma of electronic devices. And there are also certain benefits in terms of the skill sets that they are building. For example, I was watching my son meeting his friends online in a certain game where they had to agree where they're meeting, and it's not a very easy conversation. And they were so skilled to actually figure out that virtual space. So in some shape or form, their minds know how to map things very differently. And I think that in a way, those computer games prepare them for AI.
Are you calling us old?
And obsolete. Well, and I think if we will look back at our conversation, that we had last week, it's really our human journey as a society is to figure out what is old and what is new and how to combine
and navigate. It's a survival instinct too. You have to evolve in your environment, not an environment that you heard of. So,
well,
it's
but the idea behind is that we are actually moving out of the survival. And the tricky piece about technology is that it kind of activates the high beta brain frequencies, what's next, what's next, what's next, what's next, which is what prompts the survival feeling in our nervous system. So we have to figure out how to calibrate ourselves back to more stillness, because those high attention peak moments naturally were allocated when we were chasing mammoths. So it was supposed to be a very short period of time. However, nowadays, most of us live in those concentrated states of attention, and we pretty much live in those states for very prolonged periods of time. That's not healthy for our psyche, because what it does, it doesn't allow our brain waves to slow down, and we learn how to sit in our heads, which is what separates us from our hearts and creates a society that is very analytical, which is not a bad thing, but the society that is primarily predisposed to experience life from the prism of mental realm. So even in school, we are trained to compete. We are trained to follow Darwinian theory of the survival of the fittest. But if you study Darwin, you will learn that he actually tried to discredit this theory most of his life, because he was not agreeing with the way we interpreted it. And I think the reason why it was such a no for him is because our society very much operates in the narcissistic value system nowadays. It's not only consumerism, it's also righteousness. So when we talk about Native communities, they live from the prism of reverence of life. They live from the prism of responsibility. When we talk about Western society, it's primarily egoic structures. It's like, I want, I compete, I desire, whatever the cost. So there is an economic component of like dynamic production and evolution and more, bigger, better. But there is also a need for recalibration. Do we have the right to proceed? Our planet. We are all indigenous to this planet, but we lost our own interpretation of the sacredness of life. And it causes us to become consumerist. We don't understand the impact and the collective web of nature, which is detrimental to next generations. And one thing that is absolutely a concern for me is how AI reinforces that mental prism of consciousness for us, because we are outsourcing memory. We don't have to remember maps anymore. We don't have to use the calculator.
I see your point on that. It's and it's omnipresent, and it's only going to take more space in our lives. So,
and I think it can be
true.
Good move, but we have to also remember that we are not just mental. We are mind, body, and spirit.
And so I think everybody understands why the conversation I had with you 2 weeks ago was very transformative, because there you go. There is a lot of truth, and there is a lot of thoughts on our everyday life in general while talking with you. And it's amazing that you are able to analyze, but also not condemn the situation. It's always about bringing up the facts and what it does to us if we use it in a way that does not serve us. So This is why I was shook last time.
Well, I think the way this reality works is through the free will. I always think about divine, that essence of life, that force that holds us all, doesn't condemn our behaviors, no matter how bad we are. And human history proves that we are capable to a lot of destruction.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't send us in the corner to think, oops, to do like, what did we do, right?
Mm-hmm.
It kind of loves us unconditionally. And I think it
really does. Gives us chances.
Every single day.
Yeah.
And hopes that, no, I don't think of hopes, but there is definitely a collective prayer. I see it with Native communities often, and it's a true sacredness of presence to be there, because as a white person, you don't always have the permission to proceed. And there is a collective prayer for the rainbow generation when people from different walks of life come together
Mm-hmm.
to pray for our collective ascension. And
I didn't know they did that. It's beautiful.
And I think this is what's happening. So despite all of the turmoil and trials and tribulations, I can feel the invitation for all of us to rise up in our way of thinking and our way of being.
And everybody is responding to it lately, I've noticed as well. I listen to a lot of other podcasts on Spotify, for example, and a lot of the conversations turn around the fact that there is a movement, there is a time, and everybody is tuned at the moment and receptive, whereas we were not as receptive in the past. But we are going to talk about this in a moment. I just want to understand how you ended up in banking and finance, especially because it feels that you always had this calling.
So I think that my Russian identity was a very big reason for it. So first of all, I come from the command economy, so I didn't really have an understanding of capitalist realm. Accounting was a very challenging subject for me, and free markets was something that I actually never lived in.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a theory that you want to reinforce your weakness, so I took it to the next level. And in college, I actually declared that I will minor in finance, and my counselor looked at me and she said, well, you'll be in college for one extra semester. Does it make sense? And it sucked. I really struggled, but I struggled mentally, I would say. Usually studying was not very difficult, but I think it gave me an important backbone to be in a society that works based on certain laws that I just didn't have experience with before. Banking itself, I think, was an act of rebelliousness. I lived in Paris, and a lot of career paths for women from my part of the world are usually in the fashion world. And I wanted to prove that I am more than just the body. So I chose a relatively tough profession, I guess. But I also spent some time at the United Nations, and I very quickly realized that if you want to empower the world, you need to be empowered. And banking, I started actually in retail banking when I moved to New York, and it made total sense to me because I was really fascinated with Manhattan, and I got to experience people that lived and worked there. And in my first job as a banker, I had a very big mission. I actually had an opportunity to help people get loans. And for some businesses, their legacy depended on my ability to properly position them. So even though it was probably like the less glorious that job actually gave me a lot of satisfaction because I
You helped people.
saw how generational businesses were able to blossom. And then I decided that I want to go fast, and I didn't have a traditional banking career, because in banking you usually kind of stick to the segment. So I did retail, and then I did commercial, then I did corporate, and I did transformational project in a German bank. And then all this time, psychology always called me. So eventually I figured...
You shifted.
Yes.
And not only you were in banking, but you were also a mother at the time too. How did you go about that? Did you have obstacles that marked your mind, maybe, that you had to overcome?
So I'm someone who likes the challenge. Okay. So if you want to see me, like, try me, tell me I can't do something. When I had my first child, I obviously had to go on maternity. And I remember that year, despite the fact that I took maternity, I still ended up getting an award for being top 10%. And in reality, it's not a sign of health. It's a sign of overcompensation. And I struggled deeply internally. So on the surface, I probably looked successful, but I had very hard time reconciling my identity as a mother, my identity as a banker, and my identity as a wife. Because in American society, there is tremendous pressure to be perfect. And you and I spoke about it. I feel that in French society, for example, there is much more grace around feminine, and the society actually operates in much more feminine values.
Mm-hmm.
Would you agree?
I agree, absolutely, yes.
And that gave me a reference point in terms of how it could look differently. Because in France, the woman always has the right to be just a woman, and then she can be a mother, and then she can be a wife, and then she can be a business owner or employee.
So social expectations are less. I agree.
So for me, the social expectations were detrimental, and I ended up being burnt out. And that was one of the pivotal moments when I figured that I should probably
that was my next question.
Reconsider how I do life, because it just felt not sustainable. And I've lost my balance. What was your next question?
It was about that. I was going to ask you if in banking you had a specific pivotal moment that took you, that stormed in your life, letting you know that you needed to shift for your own well-being, but also because your vocation wasn't there.
So I'm a very big believer on embodying your values. And what that pivotal moment happened to me when I started digging deeper in my own journey, and I figured out that for me, love is actually a very high volume. Yet the way I lived life, my child was in daycare, my husband ate dinner by himself often. So my values were not reflective in the way I would spend my days. And that is a very serious incongruency if you think about it, because we can believe that those are our values. What actually matters is how your life is played out, because your life is what indicates your true value system. And that realization made me reconsider where exactly I spend my energy, where exactly I spend my days. So now, with 4 children, I get to be a more present mother, more present than I could probably ever be in the banking career.
You know, I appreciate enormously your point of view. Reason being, there is a lot of, I'm going to say, fake empowerment that comes from having a career, which obviously there is nothing wrong if this is what you want. But when you become a mother, there is a choice to be made. And very often women tend to wonder, why is the man not the one, sacrificing everything so I can go to work? And I think that there's just a lack of balance when you are not with your children. Is it a topic that is very omnipresent in this society nowadays?
So our society really values burnout. So the way we interpret success has a hidden cost to it.
Yes.
I think one of the core challenges that we are experiencing, which forces mothers to sacrifice their careers, is that we are no longer living in the multi-generational family structures. Most of the people are pretty much, couples are alone. They're lucky if they have, one set of grandparents. When I had my first 2 kids, I didn't have grandparents nearby, but they were incredibly giving and committed. They came from abroad, and they sustained us till my older sons could go to the daycare. That was a huge privilege.
Mm-hmm.
Now we don't have grandparents.
The family cell has changed.
Nearby.
We don't have anymore a village anymore to help us. Yes.
And I personally, because I have 7-month-old twins these days, rely on my village big time. Mm-hmm. And I'm really fortunate that at this stage of my life, I have that village. But I also have an incredible partner who is in it with me, and we don't have to argue whose career has to be sacrificed. We just are on the same team and we move in the same direction. And that's a beautiful thing. I actually didn't have that in my first marriage. And I think the reason why I didn't have it is because values is not something you figure out right away. You have to evolve as a human being. You have to understand your own path, your own journey. And career switch was not something that my ex-husband actually appreciated. In fact, he was against it because children were young and it didn't make any sense to him, which, in retrospect, I can understand and relate. But I think our main difference is that I'm very much growth mindset, and my ex-husband doesn't share the same mentality, which makes it very interesting for the kids because they get a bit of both worlds, and the worlds are almost in complete opposition.
They get both versions. At least they get to pick which one fits
and
best.
Then they will weave their own reality.
That is right.
But with my partner, it's really, and I think it's very important to have the same value system, because relationships, they never stay stagnant. They either expand or they decline. And it's a normal flow of life. We breathe and we breathe out. But what's important is to have a shared North Star.
I absolutely agree. It's I love to hear it from somebody who has, first of all, who is absolutely more knowledgeable than I am on the subject, because as mentioned, you researched and you studied enormously about connections in people with each other, but to themselves as well. You're not just choosing a partner because he's doing well in life. There is about, what do you want? Having those conversations. What do you want? And if somebody's closed-minded, sometimes it's a sign that you should just not step forward with that person. But I think that the goals before were not the same. We just did not have the same aspirations and expectations about our partners. And as we suffered, we recalibrate our expectations. We change. We want to learn about ourselves more. There's just more about the well-being that's being involved. And so having the right partner is crucial. So that's my point of view.
But if you look around and if you take a pulse of our mental health, we are struggling. And I think primarily because of that mental realm that we all agreed to experience life from. And we simply don't have enough rituals and practices to help us embody the wholeness of human experience, because we're not mental beings. We are multifaceted beings. We're energetic beings.
So this was always in us to start with.
It never changed.
Exactly, yes. We understand it better now, I think. But back maybe in the days, it was just...
Well, there is a difference between understanding and embodiment. So the world doesn't lack intellectual people. We have enough knowledge to solve a lot of our problems. But our biggest problem is the fact that we're so fragmented as human beings. We are human doers in so many ways.
Oh.
In the Western society, you are as good as your past quarter. And it's unfortunate, but each one of us has installed that inner critic within that is not always nice. And it forces us to kind of like push and achieve and accomplish. And it sets this energetic pattern of what's next. And that energetic pattern reinforced through social media.
I was going to say
Right?
what you mentioned earlier, the dopamine having to always go next, whereas we were not supposed to do that.
It forces us literally outside of our bodies. Because in order for you to truly be here now, you have to drop from your mental processing into your heart center. And we don't even remember anymore. I ask my clients often, drop in your heart. And you know what most people have to do?
What do
They have to close their eyes to even be able to,
That's right.
to find their heart center.
I do it too, yes.
Well, that is
Is it a sign of not being able to connect?
Yeah, it's a sign of not being coherent in your energetic field. So the reason why you want to close your eyes when you think about your heart center is because we are so fragmented. We can't do it simultaneously. And it's actually a very challenging experience because what it shows is that we are energetically not in coherence. So our heart center has its own wisdom. It has its own energetic sphere. And we as a society are so predominantly head-focused. We kind of trust logic and mental realm. But magic only happens when we can listen to the universe.
Yeah.
And that is available through the heart.
So you shifted to psychology, and I repeat it again because I feel that this is what sets you apart, but you researched enormously on your own, and you educated yourself on various subjects related to healing. Was there any pivotal moment of your own personal enlightenment?
Oh my God, this is such a deep question. So I've studied in Ivy League school, and all of them frameworks that were offered to us were the frameworks of white men. So that was a challenge for me. I think actually the growth mindset and the fixed mindset that I actually mentioned earlier, that is actually a framework that was brought to the collective by a woman, but most of the other frameworks are the frameworks of white men. And we revere in psychology people like Freud and Jung, and I think they made a tremendous contribution. But as it didn't make total sense for me as a woman, I understood the mental prism of masculinity, and I really struggled with my own journey as a woman in a modern society. To the degree that when I had my second son, I had 2 boys, I was so grateful that I had a boy and not a girl, because it felt so, I felt so insecure passing my own traumas and my own insecurities to that little being that chose me as a mother. So I have a girl. One of my 4 children is actually a daughter. So I think it's a sign of that I actually completed my journey and integrated something, because I adore her. I adore watching her journey as a spirit in the feminine body. But what really shifted me experientially was a journey to South Africa. I was actually studying human motivation, and I was volunteering in the rhino orphanage. And I had an opportunity to experience people from the same community that have access to the same resources. And some of them would actually kill rhinos, and others would use the small resources that they had, sometimes even sharing milk from their children, to be able to nurse those baby rhinos back for the collective. So it was such a dramatic difference for me, and it was such an interesting experience. And when I talked to those families and those people that were more guardians, what they shared with me was that interconnectedness of life, and they somehow could feel it through their hearts. And in African culture, it's really incredible, because Westerners are treated with a little bit of suspicion because we can't hear the stars. And for them is total nonsense. They cannot believe that we cannot hear the stars.
It is so embodied, as you mentioned, passed down through generation. This belief is such a true reality in their lives that they can't even comprehend why we would look at it as some sort of superstition or made-believe type of custom. Wow.
And I was sitting there literally witnessing the clash of civilizations. And there was this tremendous gratitude for the people that could still hear the music of life. And I vowed to do whatever I can to protect them, but also to try and reconcile my own energetic structures so that I could hear the stars. And I'm not there yet, but I think I keep finding the breadcrumbs, how to do it differently, how to be it differently. Because feminine specifically, we were designed to rupture, and that is something that has been taken away from us. When you see a woman that is in her embodied power, what's your number one concern? What's wrong with her? Oh, she's too much. Given my daughter, I see her embodying so much joy, and part of me is like, oh my God, like, is she socially appropriate? Is it something that will cause her problems later on? You know, like, I already have that filter that she carries way too much joy or way too much energy, or she is too loud. So I'm already putting that prism of judgment on her. It's actually
because you want to protect her. He comes from a good place, but at the same time, it's maybe preventing her from accessing the beautiful power, inner power she has.
Well, she has a very beautiful and powerful father
that is very important too.
That holds
for
her
little girl. Yes,
in her true grace.
Yeah.
But feminine is actually here to devour and to be devoured. And sometimes when I have conversations about it with my clients, it feels very violent to them, because it's like, oh my God, like, devour what? But then I think about French society, and that society is so built on feminine values, and it's all about, you know, beauty of life and couture and fashion and just incredible ability to enjoy the moment in the body right here, right now. And yeah, let's take August off and just go to the south of France and enjoy life.
And you know what you just mentioned is true. For us to understand our powers, sometimes we need to travel and see what's going on in other countries, in other civilizations. And it's important. And I think that traveling feeds the soul, but also feeds the possibilities and open our eyes to more options that we have here. If you're trying to understand what is life all about, this is a great way to do it. To me, I traveled a lot, and
you
my
also
reality
lived-
has
And you
opened
lived in
up.
so many incredible cultures, so different cultures. You lived in Japan.
And this is why I'm telling you, over there you have everything, and each country is different, and there is good to be taken from different cultures. And truly, this is what changed my life. Me, at least. I had this I was in an invisible box when I was in Belgium for a long time. And I said, I should just open, and see what's going on out there. And I remember people being reluctant of letting me go. And just because they were like, what are you going to do? Do you think it's better out there? You're just going to come back right where you started? It's a waste of time. Just go on vacation. And I said, no, I'm going to live abroad because I need to see another reality. And I'm just hoping more for myself. Like, it's a little selfish, but this, especially for a woman, and I grew up without a father. So I really wanted to have this strength, not coming from a mother who had to play two roles, the father and the mother, but coming from experience and a place of love, what you mentioned. So I could have just discovered that it wasn't it, but whatever the outcome was, I just was curious and I wanted to give it a shot. And I ended up realizing that I was not wrong about it. And I always have this conversation especially with women, because we are afraid for our safety. We're not sure. I always tell them, just take the shot and do it on your own if you can. Don't take anybody with you who knows you, because they don't really know who you are when you don't even know who you are yourself.
Well, the
So
places
good.
I traveled were in between timelines. So I couldn't find the answers at Columbia University. And modern psychology also felt limited to me. So I went far and wide, from India to ancient Egypt. I first practiced Kundalini yoga, and then I learned that Kundalini actually came to India from Egypt.
I didn't know.
And it was stored inside of the Sikh religion. So this was it was an energetic feminine practice, feminine technology, the rise of Shakti. And it originated from Egypt. And that took me in a completely different direction when I started studying Egyptian mysticism. I actually uncovered that Mary Magdalene is Egyptian priestess, and both her and Mother Mary were Isis priestesses. And I want you to think about the cult of goddess of Isis like Ivy League center, Ivy League school for feminine arts. So in ancient societies, the energy of the feminine was actually trained to women. So
and acknowledged. This is what I'm hearing, because it's not now in nowadays society.
And I think it goes back to the sacredness of life, because in Native communities, the lineage goes through the mother. We live in patriarchal structures now. And again, I don't think patriarchal structures are bad. We have divine patriarchy. The only country on planet Earth in divine patriarchy right now is actually Bhutan, which is the happiest country in the world, based on United Nations.
I had no idea.
So United Nations came up with the gross happiness index, and the country Bhutan is the happiest country in the world.
Do you remember when you mentioned that the spirit, the mind, and the body were separated? During history?
In the Western realm, the rise of... So we need to talk timelines just a little bit to give the proper context to that remark. So the last 2,000 years were pretty challenging years for humanity, and that's when all of the patriarchal structures that are not aligned, in my opinion, were formed. So we're talking about most of the monotheistic traditions, most of monotheistic religions, world wars, Holocaust, nuclear bomb, all of that happened in the past 2,000 years. And that era, astrologically speaking, has been called Kali Yuga, or the Piscean Age. And the energetic logic behind it is that it was a very dense energetic time for our collective, and we had to truly master our shadow. So Carl Jung made total sense out of all of it, our collective unconscious. Now, in 2012, the timelines shifted, and it is an opportunity for feminine to rise. What does it mean? It means that the energy that is in the air does not reinforce masculine structures of domination anymore. And we actually have an energetic opportunity, we women have an energetic opportunity to be able to recalibrate what we consider normal. Now, it's a very tricky conversation because when you are in suppressed states for so long, your first recalibration is defiance, right? So like if you were in compliance for too long, you kind of like sway on the opposite spectrum. And I think that's what happened to Me Too movement, unfortunately, because I feel like Me Too movement weaponized the mission and the purpose, and it didn't serve as well. The way we use our voice is actually very important. And it seems like we actually use the same strategies against men now. And I don't think that men are specifically wanting to hurt us. I work with men in my practice, and I don't find a lot of men that wake up in the morning and they're like, okay, let's oppress the feminine. But even as a woman, I've been brainwashed to perceive this reality from a very masculine prism of reference. And like even the movies, the script climaxes, which is a very masculine way to experience life, if you think about it.
Yes.
So it takes tremendous responsibility for us as women to actually heal ourselves and be willing to have gracious conversations around what doesn't work. Mm-hmm. Because men can't fix it on their own. They need our contribution. They need our perspective. But we talk about it from the victim consciousness, which is a very disempowered place to begin with. So in psychology, we have what we call Karpman drama triangle, and we all know it. That's pretty much how the society vibes nowadays.
I talked about this triangle to everybody around me since we last met. I'm not even joking. It was such a revelation on so many ways, and it helps you determine better a lot of your relationships.
Yes.
So I'm gonna let you go ahead and brief us on the subject.
So in a nutshell, the drama triangle is victim, savior, persecutor. And the idea is that most of our relationships are somewhere in that triangle. So you may be victim in one conversation, and then you become a savior in the other, et cetera, et cetera. So most of us unconsciously default to that relational dynamic. Why? Because that's how we rolled for so long. And I think the challenge that we've experienced is that at some point in our collective history, we experienced a corruption between masculine and feminine. So we talk about temple tradition, we talk about ancient Egypt, and the feminine and the masculine were revered for their difference there. And then somewhere, in my opinion, from my research, I wasn't there, probably I could have been there, you know, if you believe in past lives, there is definitely a tremendous pull for me energetically to be exploring, you know, that timeline. So who knows? But I think within Second Kingdom, there was a corruption when masculine went into domination and feminine went into manipulation. And I think this is what shifted our authentic reverence of each other, but most importantly, the reverence of life. And then as Western society progressed, we had to establish bigger structures of domination, such as Catholic Church. Like, not everyone knows that Islam is actually a counter reaction to the violence of the Crusaders. They were absolutely merciless. So when someone talks about infidels in Quran, what it means is that the people that would pretty much kill anyone, they meet in their path in the name of God. So those deep structures of collective domination, and I believe that most of the religions are indoctrination, propaganda structures, they took over the dominion over human experience. So in temple tradition, if you want to connect to the divine, you would go in the temple and there is no translator. It's you and the divine. In fact, people lived in relative proximity to the divine. Now, when you think about the divine, it's somewhere there, right? You pray up. There is Heavenly Father there, which actually creates a mental separation between you as a human being and the divine somewhere on the cloud in heaven. So on top of that, we all, not all, but those of us that were raised in the religious doctrine, we are experiencing the shame and guilt, very heavy emotions at a very young age by witnessing the crucifixion. And the message behind it is that you are this dirty, sinful thing that killed the Son of God. So if I'm a dirty, sinful thing, and this is God, which means I'm not God. So in many ways, the entire fragmentation between us as spiritual beings, us as the divine beings, have been in place for so long that it's really difficult to walk this path of life as a modern human being and be like, yep, I'm divine, remember that. Because the society is not set up this way.
And how does that affect the triangle?
So because of that form of domination,
yes,
we don't really understand boundaries very well. Like,
I see.
Like if you go and live in native communities, no one tries to sway you, no one tries to like convince you. They organize in a very different way to us. There's no like hidden agenda to get ahead of someone. They live in very unique collaboration structures that are not hierarchical. They're more circular. You know, people come together and they help according to what they can do. In victim triangle, there is never ending push for the energy. Who is on top? In every conversation, someone is on top and someone is kind of like on the bottom. Like, for example, right now, you give me a lot of power to lead. So I'm taking more of a leadership position.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very typical for Western realm because someone needs to be a leader. Someone has to show us the way.
Okay.
So we lost our authentic ability to self-individuate through the connection within. We have to look at the external prism of reference to figure out like who is the leader. But also human boundaries are not very clear, right? Like there is no actual border here. So there is constant fight for the power, constant fight for leadership.
So is leadership negative, or can leadership be transferred to the other? Such as, for example, you're talking right now and you transfer leadership to me, but if now your intentions are not the right ones, you might overpower me if I'm letting myself be the victim. Is it what it is?
So let's look at the example of the Bhutan. So Bhutan is considered divine patriarchy because the leader has tremendous awareness over the power distribution, and it doesn't have the agenda to actually like steal the resources. When you look at a lot of collective structures societally, even countries, countries that have tyrannical dictators, there the power is used as the leadership is used as form of power that steals from the masses to kind of like centralize in the hands of few. And that is how I interpret the victim triangle. So for us as individuals, it's very important not to fall prey to a victim story, but also not to fall prey to the savior story, and kind of try to be in the neutrality of it all. Because in neutrality, we actually can rebalance ourselves outside of our mental understanding of who we are, like this human identity, and go back in the bodies and hopefully in the hearts.
So you talk about balance, and there is another a revelation that you brought to me last time we were together, and it's about feminine and masculine energy. I started sensing it in a way where women after... everybody was very influenced by, for example, the feminism. And I remember thinking, it sucks. Who did that? I don't think it serves us in the best way. And I started myself reading about how feminine and masculine energy should be balanced inside of us. And whereas we were put in a very feminine energy, almost without us wanting it, we broke free and went all the way to embrace the masculine energy and just say, I don't want to see this feminine anymore. And men have it too, right? They have this masculine energy that they have to showcase because this is what society want from them. And the feminine is very shoved down because we don't want to see any of that. It shows weakness in a man. And I know you work on that. And I love this generation. I love it. I'm very happy that I'm getting to witness that because up to in the 80s, nobody was talking about those things.
Yes. And I think a lot of it is because in 2012, the timelines shifted. So if you remember Mayan calendar, it expired in 2012. So it wasn't the end of the world. It's just ancient civilizations were aware of astrology and they knew that in 2012, we will shift out of the age of Pisces into the age of Aquarius. So there is new energy that is available. Now, when we talk about feminine and masculine, it is such a confusing topic because somehow we have a very artificial understanding what actually is feminine. So in our understanding, feminine is passive and pretty. Said who?
Passive and pretty.
Like, think
That's
about it.
Way to put
feminine,
it. Yes.
Divine feminine. First of all, we lost, all of us, through the monotheistic traditions. We are all orphaned because where is the divine mother? And some people will tell me, well, Mother Mary. I'm like, well, great, but she's a virgin and I'm a mother and I'm not a virgin. So if I'm not a virgin, does it mean that I'm not good? So, like, you see, it's a very important internal process of trying to question what's been given to you as truth, because what's true for me may not be true for you. And that was my big realization, because I had a traditional marriage, but passive and pretty just didn't work for me. And I felt so guilty for my masculinity But it wasn't my masculinity. It's my life force. It's my energy. It's my fire. So our society, our mentalist society, allows labels because that's how we make sense out of things. So we all decided to attribute certain qualities and call them masculine, and certain qualities that we call feminine. But who said who? Let's just say, let's look at the neuroscience and let's look at the left hemisphere and right hemisphere. Like, that makes more sense to me. And ideally, we put, logic and reasoning on one side, and then our artisticness and flow on the other side. And what we want to have in neuroscience and neuroplasticity, which is our ability to use both hemispheres. So that is the idea that I actually bring in my practice. We don't want to be just one way. We have to have the fluidity of all of the emotional capacities and all of the ways of being, so that we can show up according to what the situation or the circumstances are requesting. As a mother, I have to be very different with my children than I am with my clients, for example. And it doesn't mean that I'm fake. In fact,
I see your point.
I have been working very hard on integrating my beingness a certain way, so that I can just adjust my behavior, but my energy stays consistent.
Stay authentic.
But what happens to most of us as women is that we are forced to have more assertive, energies that we would typically call masculine.
Mm-hmm.
And then we judge ourselves for those ways because we are apparently not feminine enough. And it's such a strong imprint and such a big cage to uncover within.
There is a lot of light that has been taken from women and what they've done in the past. I agree. It's just not in the narratives nowadays. Nowadays, it's just not something that people wanted to talk about. And when we talk about the men, where do they stand with their feminine?
But I don't believe it's the feminine. I think it's integration. So
Of both.
And
acceptation too of both, right?
So let's just think that we're not mind, body, and spirit.
Okay.
Well, we also have to go back to that point because we didn't finish that rabbit hole. So we are trained to believe that certain things are better than others. So boys don't cry. Mm-hmm. And men are supposed to be like those strong, assertive, authoritarian beings.
Mm-hmm.
That's just a small spectrum of the human experience. And now more and more men are encouraged to practice their emotional intelligence. So we are kind of shifting from the idea that IQ is great. Now IQ and EQ is great, but there is also a next level of evolution, which is spiritual intelligence. And the spiritual intelligence is actually the understanding that you are the wholeness of it all, that you experience this duality in a very profound way. And it's not just feminine and masculine and intellect and heart, logic and magic. It's actually your ability to truly harmonize all of it within yourself so that you can be the place of grace, the place of divine expression. And I love saying that.
It's beautiful. And you help people, right, get to that point in your practice.
So that is what I had to do on myself, because I hated my masculine. I judged it. And then I was like, hold on a second, Victoria. Your masculine is what kept you alive. Why would you judge that? Then I was like, well, I'm not passive. It's like judging that you are introverted versus extroverted. And there is nothing wrong with being passive. In fact, it can be a very beautiful dynamic for an integrated woman, as long as it's not codependent, limiting prism of being that she defaults on completely.
Mm-hmm.
Then it becomes overcompensation, and then most likely it becomes manipulation.
I see.
And my vision for humanity is to not have more intellectual people, even though obviously I love intellect and I'm a big nerd myself, but more integrated people people that can be in the coherence of their hearts and their minds, people that can experience themselves as multidimensional beings, not as linear mental beings. Because logic is great, but logic only gets us this far. We have intuitive senses. We have the capacity to sense what's true for us. And it's not universal. Everyone has a different understanding of what is true for them. And that's where the sacredness of life comes in, when we give ourselves permission to actually individuate divine based on what feels the most authentic line for us.
So what is your goal right now? I'm going to talk about, once again, the audience is for everybody, but I like to empower women. This is also my mission here with the podcast. And what is how do you see the future? What do you see for women in this era of Aquarius?
Beautifully asked. And I will quote Dalai Lama. And he said that the world is going to be saved by a Western woman. And I actually believe him. And that is my mission. I help Western women to be the agents of change for themselves, their families, and their societies. And the reason why it's us, Western women, because we have the resources.
I was going to say that.
We have the
more rights, more resources.
We sit at the table.
Privileges. And it comes
that
with responsibility.
Our grandmothers couldn't even dream having.
Yeah.
In the United States, a woman was not allowed to have a credit card by herself, I believe, till like 80s. Can you believe that?
I told you, the 80s changed. This is where really things started to change somehow.
So I believe that Western women, they are like shepherds. So if you know, like imagine the herd, when the herd runs and like kind of like on the autopilot, the shepherd dogs and the shepherds, they kind of like blend in first and then they reroute. They reroute the course of the flow, right? So I believe that those women that are strong and assertive and capable, that already mastered the masculine ways and the patriarchal structures, they are those shepherd dogs. And they will calibrate back to their wholeness and help create a completely new realm. And that's my prayer for all of us. And I work with women in that specific field. So I created the framework of mind, body, spirit integration. It's actually called Claim Your Queendom. And the reason why it's queendom, because we as queens normally don't even have a real estate. It's usually queen of the kingdom. So I wanted to shift that even in the name. And it's been a huge, huge journey for me individually to work with women pretty much from different paths of life, but all hearing the calling for more magic, more joy, more alignment, more power. So it is a very unique way of reclaiming your power, not from the forceful way, but from the place of magnetizing it. What Magdalene did.
And I have one question, and this will be a personal question, but I think that would serve, that would inform everybody, is when do you feel that you're ready to connect with your feminine, masculine, your spirit? When do you know that you have this open-mindedness in this rush, this life that always demands more? When do you feel, when is the time? How can you pinpoint the moment where a woman should maybe, if she feels a certain type of way, a void in her, to say, hey, this is the time for you to maybe connect?
So I think that there is an invitation every second of the moment to really listen. In my individual journey, I listened to the calls, but I was too afraid to make the shifts, because sometimes unknown hell feels better than unknown heaven. And I think that's where we are as a society. So what I would encourage people to do is to start sitting in the stillness, in the silence. We're so overstimulated that our egos and our minds are actually very loud. And, sometimes it can be a 5-minute meditation. Sometimes, you can work on your spiritual practice. Our life is actually our ceremony. The way we talk to ourselves is how we pray. We don't use those sacred words in the transactionality of modern life, but we are divine. We are divine temples of light. And that realization is not always viscerally experienced, because obviously we all have traumas, we all have trials and tribulations, everyone needs to pay bills. But at some point, the calling to slow down, which is very illogical because you think you need to go faster, bigger, do more. It's actually reverse. You have to start defranchising from the egoic structures that kind of like pull you to be more busy, more this, more that. And in that stillness, you can actually reconnect to the true wisdom of who you are.
Wow. That was very powerful. It was very, very powerful. And for anyone who is interested in getting in touch with Victoria, I will write the description, as I always say, all the information in the description down below. She's a wonderful being. If you haven't realized by now, you might not have this open-mindedness yet, but she also has a vocation. And honestly, it's hard to hear it from the podcast, but I'm here sitting with her. And the vibration that comes from her is so powerful. And her wanting you to find your way and heal is just this music that you're able to transmit across the room. I encourage you all to reach out to her and have a consultation and ask more about what you can do to feel better about yourself in the universe.
So if you've been in therapy and you feel like you are hitting the limit, that's a perfect time to reach out to me specifically.
Right. Oh, parenthesis. Yes, you mentioned that. That was also when is the time. So you mentioned when the therapy is not enough, you've talked and you confessed to a therapist, and then there is a moment where you hit the wall. You do not feel that you're growing or evolving anymore. This is when
those usually are the openings when the soul asks for more.
Okay.
So I'm known to be a spiritual DNA activator. Now, what is spiritual DNA? It's the wisdom of your soul. It's that multidimensional experience that you are actually before you agreed to be this linear being that is a certain age, certain identity, certain way of being. So people reach out for different reasons, and I encourage all of you, if you have a call or if you have more questions, to absolutely reach out. My Instagram is called Rise to Legendary, because we are the legendary generation. And we can be a legend of collective destruction, or we can be the legend of collective ascension, and my prayer is for the second.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for coming today and being here. Thank you, Victoria.
And that brings us to the end of today's episode. Until next time, stay bold, stay brilliant, and keep building your own success story. If you loved what you heard, be sure to subscribe, leave a comment, and share this episode with someone who needs to hear it.